captured an American soldier, and they had a picture of the guy sitting there, and there was a gun being pointed at his head. It was actually G.I. Joe, and that was actually his own M16 that was being pointed at him from off camera. And that was mainstream news for about 2 hours until we popped it up, and we have some toy collectors on FARC that are like, hey, wait a minute, that's Kung Fu Grip G.I. Joe right there. And the reason that most people don't remember is because not only did that come off of CNN and Fox almost immediately when they read it, because those guys are on FARC all the time, they absolutely purged it out of like all memory. It's completely gone. So it was one of those things most people never got a chance to see because it was only about 2 hours old. So, any other questions or comments about the American media? Because I could talk about this crap for days. Yes?
Yeah, okay. So, you sit there at the helm of essentially the American media machine. So you get, all the news that you can possibly handle, through the FARC-Q, but is there any other media that you regularly or even irregularly pay attention to that doesn't come in through the FARC?
Yeah, actually, somebody asked this last year, and it was kind of funny. It was one of the radio guys, and it was an interesting follow-up because I did like an hour and a half drunken interview with them last night. And he mentioned asking me the same question, and one of the ones I told him, and I said this last year, was there's a website called Stratfor, STRATFOR.com, and they're a political think tank. They have a free level that you can get where they'll spit an article out to you about every couple of weeks or so. I actually signed on for the pay version. They saw that I signed up for it and gave it to me for free because they all read FARC over there, which is a little bit scary. But the analysis that these guys give out are incredibly detailed and very accurate because what these guys do is basically, if you're a government or a corporation that wants to know about a political situation on the ground in a given country, you would call these guys up and basically hire them to give you a detailed analysis of what's going on. What I like about these guys is that they are basically making money by being right, and they're not partisan at all. They've run a few articles out the door that managed to basically piss off both sides of partisan readers that they've got, because occasionally they make mention of the fact that everybody's mad at them for something they wrote. But they have some very, very interesting analyses, including like during the war in Afghanistan, for example. They called every single facet of it before it occurred, all the way down to how it would end. It was absolutely amazing. And they're not right all the time, but when they have to make a correction, they issue one. And what's interesting about that is recently they were talking about Iran. And on the Iran situation, they were talking about how the guy who's the president, basically, the guy who was talking about wiping Israel off the map, at a press conference, just kind of mentioned that. They was talking about how he's a complete whack job. They said the bench over for Iranian politics is pretty thin. There's nobody left there. That's the guy they had to run up the flagpole to get him out there. And as a result, they were thinking that they wouldn't have actually made him president unless they could control him. They've actually changed their minds recently. Now what they think is going to happen in Iran, and I unfortunately think they're absolutely right, is that they are predicting that Iran will provoke a survivable attack. That's what they think is going to happen next. I think they're dead on. They said that Iran's trying to wrest leadership of the Muslim war from Al-Qaeda, and the only way to do that is basically become the martyr. Provoke a survivable attack, get your military installations bombed in 20 different areas, and, oh, look at us, the Jews and the Americans are hurting us, everybody rally around us. That's what they think is going to happen next, and I think they're right. It's interesting to look at it from that perspective. Interestingly enough, too, they are completely unconcerned about North Korea, for the simple fact that China is the most concerned about a nuclear North Korea, and they give North Korea all their oil. China has this interesting habit of they control the only pipeline into North Korea. Anytime the North Koreans start getting all wacky crazy, they cut it off. And North Korea calls, I swear to God, this is all true. Then North Korea calls them up to ask them about it. Hey, why is our oil cut off? And they say, oh, it's a technical problem. And usually it's only for a day. But there was a time where basically there was a series of events where, I don't know, they said something. Chinese cut their oil off for a day, and they calmed down. Then they turned it back on. They turned it back on. The North Koreans said something else. They shut it off for 2 days and then turned it back on. And then they did something else. And the Chinese basically, this is where it all ended dead. They cut them off for a week because they wouldn't shut the hell up. And if you notice, it's been kind of calm over there lately. It's a really interesting look at geopolitics from a more realistic perspective. And I really like that website. It's neat.
Wow. What was the URL again?
It's Stratfor, STRATFOR.com. It's fascinating stuff. So, yes? Oh, yeah. Right.
Because you don't hear anything about it.
Yeah.
What will it take to make that change?
I don't think it's going to change. I really don't. And I think what it would take to get anybody interested is American involvement. And again, it's more kind of it's an insular kind of characteristic about American society, I think. It's just like we're very inward looking. We don't pay a lot of attention to that kind of stuff. It's possible that somebody, if we got a president in office who would actually masquerade against causes like that on a up and up basis, that attitude might change. But I think in general we're just kind of screwed on that. Sorry, go ahead.
Versus like in Somalia, nobody cared until American military were
Right.
Is that what you're saying? Like, it's
Yeah.
going to take something that major for.
We have to be actually involved in it in order to actually get involved in it, and it's sad but true. This is how it's going to go, unfortunately. I think the main reason it's kind of like occasionally you'll see people talk about like nobody goes to the opera anymore, or nobody goes to museums anymore. Well, nobody ever did. That was definitely a high class pursuit. Your average guy really didn't do that kind of thing, and I'm going to have to think about this a little bit longer. But one of my little pet theories is I think that's how people's kind of awareness of current events goes too. In that I think that most people really are just kind of placid and don't really care until that actually occurs. And that isn't necessarily even what's going on with us, is on a more international level too. Like Europe could probably give a crap of what's going on in Afghanistan, for example. Same kind of thing all over, I guess. So, but that's just my guess. I want to reserve the opportunity to change my mind later, however, because the jury's not out on that yet. So, yes.
Going along the same lines where you were saying that nobody goes to the opera anymore, nobody goes to the museum anymore. The same problem I think kind of comes out in the media where you sort of have trouble sort of selling ideas to the average reader. I mean, you said
Yes.
yourself that most people probably can't even point out on a map where Yugoslavia is.
Right.
I can honestly say for myself that that's something I experienced too when they were talking about that dictator that was recently captured in Africa from
Yeah,
country
right.
that I can't identify on a map myself.
Yeah.
So I mean, do you see a way around the fact that media is going to have trouble selling these stories to the average reader to make them interesting? Because if you can't tell where they are happening, then why would the average reader care?
Yeah, that's it actually. Interestingly, when I was in Moscow, I was on that same trip. I was over in Norway visiting Aftenposten. I was talking to Pravda about it because they send a lot of traffic to us and vice versa because they're really funny guys. But they were talking about how if they wanted to get a lot of traffic to any kind of a story, they have to run something about ghosts or aliens. And like that gets all the traffic right there. And I said, or boobs. And they're like, yeah, well, the boobs thing was just kind of like, that was obvious. But the ghosts or the aliens thing, that was like, and that's what they do. It probably will run some really strange stories, but occasionally it's because that's what gets people interested. Aftenposten was telling me, that's the state newspaper in Norway. Not anymore because they've got competition now, but back in the day it was. And they have a sister paper that the tabloid has 10 times the circulation they do. I think it's just human nature. I think it's just what we're interested in. We want to know what Tom Cruise is doing. We want to know, whether or not Lindsay Lohan showed a boob recently. Don't really care if they've captured any African dictators, and I think that's just the way it goes.
Does the Norway paper do the same page 3 thing that the English papers do?
The Aftenposten does not, but their tabloid, absolutely. Yes, they do. Yeah, because they're all about the boobs over there in Norway. They love it. Anybody else? Yes.
Question: when Pope John Paul died, and that got just major media coverage.
Yeah,
I was kind
yeah.
of curious about that because they could have as easily done, when Pope John Paul died in the Vatican, and maybe do a few small segments, but
Yeah.
it's huge 24-hour coverage, which I enjoyed watching. But why do you think they did that?
I think because it played well amongst people, and also too, it was something that they could kind of move forward as an ongoing thing. The whole who's going to win, kind of like the NCAA tournament, that kind of thing. Also too, it's like the Hispanic community is mostly Catholic and is deeply interested in that, and that's a way to hit a demographic as well. I apologize if I sound kind of cynical about this kind of thing, but I don't think that a lot of this stuff happens for any other reason than they can generate dollars off of it. And I think that they knew that. I mean, there's 1 billion Catholics worldwide, so that's going to play to a pretty big audience. At least those guys will be interested, as opposed to what happened in golf yesterday, which is getting a very small subset of the population. So I think that was the main thing.
We have time for probably one more question.
Okay, sounds good. Anybody got one? Shout out if you got a crazy one.
Oh, I just want to tell you that part of the reason they covered the John Paul thing is because they were sick and tired of talking about Terry Schiavo.
You know what? You're probably right. I would almost agree with that. Yes. So one more.
Yeah. Okay. So the boobies, pretty much disappeared from the front page and then reappeared on some other website.
Right.
Can you sort of tell us, how the what happened to the boobies?
We had advertisers. Yeah, well, they're all around us. I don't know if you. The advertisers are basically complaining that they didn't want to advertise next to that stuff. I suspect that they were actually just making up excuses, kind of like when you're in junior high and you don't want to go out with somebody and tell them they're too tall. You know, you tell them something they can't change, and so that way you've got an excuse. That's my theory. I am not yet proven right or wrong on this, but at any rate, that was an excuse we were getting. So instead of letting them continue to use that, we just went ahead and I took a page from Gawker, because Gawker does that. 2/3 of Gawker's traffic comes from FleshBot. And I'm thinking, oh, well, you know, I mean, just send it over here. That'll work out pretty well. So that was basically the idea.
So are you saying that the advertising hasn't changed yet? So,
No, it hasn't.
So if it doesn't eventually increase, will you move the boobies back?
Absolutely. You better believe it. Excellent. Yeah, if anybody else has any more questions, feel free to hit me. I'll be like walking around. I'll be in the bar probably most of the night, so just hit me. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it.